Hey everyone, welcome back. It is Tuesday, and today is painting number 12 of the Summer Paintings project. And we're going to continue on with painting these still life objects that are symmetrical. So today I'm going to be painting this blue bowl that is the special bowl that Busha, Katie's mom, has passed down to us. And I'm going to give it a try. It's a pretty bright blue bowl. So it's really going to challenge me in the blue spectrum of my colors today. We'll see if my phthalo blue and a little bit of ultramarine can handle this. So we'll see. We'll talk about it as we're painting. So let's paint. Okay, so this is painting number 12. Again, we are in week 3 of the Summer Paintings project. Today I'm painting this bowl, this blue bowl that I just mentioned. And I kind of love how this blue bowl captures light. It's like this clear glass that just absorbs light and doesn't seem to get really dark anywhere on the bowl. Even on the darkest side of the bowl, it just grabs light and absorbs it and almost acts like a sponge for light. It's sort of like a little piece of stained glass. So that's something that attracted me to this bowl. But also the bowl is really meaningful to Katie and to her mom and to her family because it's this bowl that's been passed down and was given to Katie's mom at her wedding, I believe, and given again to me and Katie at our wedding. So today I am totally changing my approach. You'll notice at the beginning of this painting, I started out with drawing a plane in perspective. I even mapped out perspective lines in a horizon line at my eye level and went back into drawing one, learning how to draw a perspective, learning how to draw an ellipse in space. And so I was like, I'm not going to screw around today. Yesterday was really difficult trying to draw this little Fiesta ceramic bowl and just freehand it. So today I decided I would take a different tactic and use those basic perspective techniques to help me draw the top of the bowl a little bit more accurately from the get-go of the painting. And if you've never learned any of these techniques, they're super helpful. It almost is a fail-safe way to draw like an ellipse in space really accurately. You basically just start by drawing the top plane of like a box. If you imagine that the top plane of the bowl is actually a box shape, and then you find the perspective of it, the angles of the sides of that box, and the two side edges converging towards the vanishing point on the horizon line that is also the same line that's your eye level line. Then you just basically draw an X from the diagonal corners, and that shows you the exact center point of the top of that box. And then you just draw a line straight out, shows you the middle of the sides, and then you already have the middle of the center since this object is centered in the composition. And then there's a few other small techniques to get the ellipse itself to flow into the top of that box kind of shape that you've delineated. But that's a lot easier once you have all of these structural lines and diagonals in place for you to make a pretty accurate ellipse that makes sense with perspective. So I use that today just to ease the headache of having to redraw and redraw that ellipse on the top of this bowl like I was doing yesterday. So the composition for today is a fairly simple composition. The bowl is centered in the frame. It's just below the midway point if you kind of grab the average center of the shape of the bowl. It's floating just below center on the composition, and it's sitting on top of a stack of books. And I actually put it up on top of this stack of books to get the level of the bowl higher, so it was closer to my eye level. And then I ended up just thinking, this sort of looks like a nice setup actually, and I wasn't really planning on painting these books. I was planning on just using them to raise up the base of the platform that the bowl was going to sit on so that it was closer to eye level for me. But then I ended up just liking how they looked. It actually is a situation that happens probably pretty frequently in my messy little studio that I'm using right now. So I was like, hey, this looks good. I'm going to use it. And I also, there's something too about a stack of books that I love. We have a ton of books. We're always getting rid of books, but then more books find their way into our home, and it's fine. We're always reading books I've actually ended up starting to listen to more books because I can listen while I'm painting and sort of kill two birds with one stone. It also kind of puts me in a good headspace while creating something. I'm sort of taking in information visually, but I'm also taking in either a narrative if I'm listening to something like a novel or something that's a little bit more of a narrative book. Or other times I'm listening to more sort of classic books, something that you might get from a great books tradition. I've been sort of working my way through a lot of these books and other psychology books and theology books, anything in that kind of vein. I will listen to that for a few hours if my mind is feeling fresh and able to work out a lot of technical information as I'm painting. But then I will just get exhausted and need to listen to something that's just someone telling me a story or something that's really simple and more pleasure reading. After that, I'll just get sick of listening to audiobooks and then I'll blast some kind of like punk music or something that will just get me energized and help me cruise into the end of a painting. So it totally just depends on what mood. Anyways, I digress. So let's talk a little bit about the process of this painting too. You'll notice that you can see the bowl in the corner of the frame of the video, and you can see the painting of the bowl, and they're actually the same size. So I'm doing a painting process that's called sight size painting. And if you're not familiar with sight size painting, it basically means that you paint what you see at the exact same scale as you see it. So there's no sort of relative enlargement or shrinking of the measurements that are in front of you. You actually find your spot where you are looking from. You could call this like your station point. You find that station point, maybe put a piece of tape down on the ground, and then you flick your eye from the painting surface to the setup or whatever you're painting, the subject. And when you paint the things the exact same size, it makes the drawing process go a lot faster, and there's also a lot less translation that has to happen. It's just this really basic one-to-one painting process that I really love using. For me, it speeds up the drawing process of the painting like crazy. Some painters just really can't stand working this way, and that's fine. But for me, I love it. It works really well with my disposition, you could say. And it kind of relates to a few things from my past that make measurement and painting a little more fluid for me. So I grew up in a construction family. My dad owned a construction business, and I started working with my dad really young, like 12 years old. He would start taking me and he was teaching me how to do like fine carpentry, like trim. So he would have me doing base and shoe molding since I was a young kid. And it didn't matter that I had to get down onto the ground on my knees and then get back up like, a few hundred times in the day. Whereas, for him, it was a little bit more difficult. So my dad would work on crown molding, chair rail, casing around windows and doors, and he would have me doing base and shoe molding. And there's certain times when you're doing base and shoe molding where you have to cope corners. And some of the homes that I was helping my dad out at this time in my life when I was pretty young, maybe up until I was like 15, a lot of them were basically like McMansions that had huge trim in them. So sometimes the trim was like, 12 inches tall and had a really ornate kind of profile to it. So for those of you who've never done any trim work before, this is like just a little bit of information. I won't get too deep into it. But when you have two pieces of base running into a corner at a 90-degree angle, you have to have one piece of base that just has a straight cut, and then the other piece of base is profiled and cut out, and you call it coping. It's coped out the entire profile of the piece of base to match the other one. And there's also, people who do trim that would just cut a clean 45 on both. And that's a really ugly, unprofessional way to do trim. But still, that's like really common in homes. But my dad taught me how to, cope a corner. And I loved coping, actually. It was funny that I really enjoyed it. And there was something super satisfying about getting a corner to just perfectly fit together like a puzzle piece. And there was no gap anywhere. There was no sliver of disconnection between the two pieces, but they like perfectly clicked together. There was something so satisfying about getting a corner perfect that I actually really enjoyed doing that work. It was really fun. And I think that same joy for measurement and getting things to sort of click together perfectly has transferred over into painting for me. And I've always been really attracted to painters that have measurement as a huge element to their process. Things like measurement, things like human perception and vision. Another thing I'll tell you, one other little story that also kind of plays into this for me. So when I was a little boy, my uncles and sometimes my brothers would all call me Ralphie from the 80s movie A Christmas Story. So apparently I looked just like this childhood actor and kind of acted like him. And they would always say this taunting phrase to me from the movie, "You'll shoot your eye out." And so if you haven't seen A Christmas Story, it's this little boy, Ralphie, who wants this Red Ryder BB gun, and he asks Santa Claus for it. He asks his parents, and everyone's response is always like, "What? You'll shoot your eye out, kid." And so he just keeps asking everyone for it. So when I was, I think, 11 years old, a friend of mine and my brother and me, we were all playing with BB guns and a Red Ryder BB gun at that. And we thought it would be funny to just start shooting each other in the legs and whatnot. And this turned into full on like running at each other, shooting each other in the bodies and things with BB guns. This just sounds crazy, but you know, we're in the Midwest and little boys playing with BB guns in the yard is sort of normal. So long story short, I'm hiding behind a tree, running from one tree to another. As soon as I get out from behind the tree, a BB actually hits me right in the eye. And it was the weirdest thing. Like, I got this bright flash of pink light in my eye, and then it went from pink to everything in that eye went to red, and then to pure black. And then I was just like terrified, jumping around, screaming like, "Oh my gosh, what's happening to me?" And my vision just went totally black in that eye. And it looked so bad that they actually thought the BB had gone into my eyeball. I'm so sorry, those of you who are squeamish. I'm like telling this really awful story. But I couldn't see out of my eye for almost an entire year. But luckily, my vision completely returned, and I only have just this little scar on my iris as evidence of it ever having happened. But for that whole year, I could only see out of my left eye. And I realized really quickly how much depth perception matters and how important it is for navigating the world and not like running into things when you think they're further away from you than they really are, or even being able to like catch a ball that's thrown at you. It is really hard to do with only one eye. So this played into a further sort of fascination, you could say, or appreciation for depth perception and for my own vision. And I think that encouraged in me a sort of need for measurement and finding things through measurement with vision. So, so today, sorry, we didn't talk a ton about the painting, but I thought it would be fun to tell that story today. So I think this painting was a blast today, and I loved going into the site size process. I'm going to probably use this for the rest of the week, doing these paintings site size like this and seeing what happens with it. There was something too about this painting. I loved that weird reflection that you got on the bottom of the bowl of the hand towel that the bowl is resting on. And also just this really kind of simple color palette. The blue bowl is this really punchy, vibrant blue coming right out of the center of the composition, almost becomes this like void in the middle. And then you get little hints of that blue on the hand towel, some really dark blue on some of the books. And the rest of the composition is just a lot of neutrals, sort of cool grays, some warm grays, and that's about it. So this painting has me thinking a lot about Northern European still life paintings, Dutch still life paintings. And also as I was working, I was sort of thinking about Cézanne and some of Cézanne's still life paintings, even a little bit of Matisse's still life paintings. But today's painting did feel like kind of going back in time as a painter. It felt like I was in a painting one class, and this is sort of a setup that you would get in a painting one context. And this is like maybe the fourth or fifth assignment. Paint a still life with a really simple color palette, maybe a complementary color palette or something. And there's something really fun about revisiting that kind of a painting as a painter who's been painting for a little while. I mean, granted, I'm still pretty young as a painter, but I've painted enough to where this would otherwise seem like really boring content, but there's something really satisfying about going back to the basics and going into the painting process genuinely and really just trying to accurately depict what's in front of you and see if you can manipulate the paint to describe the forms that are in front of you. And yeah, it's actually really fun. And it brings me back to that sort of original joy of painting that I had when I was in my early 20s. And I honestly hope that never leaves me. I hope that I could paint something like this when I'm in my 60s, when I'm in my 80s, and it is still just as much of a blast when I'm at the end of my life as it was when I was young. And it felt like that sort of first love, first romance with art and with painting, and you get all of these really great vibes, and it just fills you with life and fills you with energy, even though it's just something simple like a still life. It's a really satisfying process to do. So that's the painting for today. I will see you all tomorrow. If you have any questions about this painting or questions about the process, definitely send me a message and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. So have a good day, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow. Take it easy. Bye.